and welcome to the second in a four-part series for executive development, sponsored by the National Institute of Corrections and the Public Welfare Foundation. We would like to thank both NIC and Public Welfare Foundation for funding this effort, and the Chief Probation Officers of California, and specifically Stephanie Anderson, for assisting in what we hope are helpful sessions for probation executives in California. My name is Zach Delpra, and I'm a Senior Associate at the Crime and Justice Institute at CRJ. I'm today in a session that will provide important information on collaboration. Some probation chiefs and directors in California have had experience in the last year with the realignment and the responsibility of chairing the Community Corrections Partnership in each county. This was developed for chief probation officers, directors, seconds in command, but I'm aware that some chiefs have asked others in their organization to attend. We welcome all of you who are on the webinar and listening in. Remind you that if you have questions for our panelists, you can use the Q&A section to ask those questions at the bottom right-hand corner of your page. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Before we introduce our presenters today, I would like to take a second to thank our staff at CJI, specifically Kristen Nielsen and Gabriella Priest, for coordinating material and the technology behind today's webinar. I would also like to tell you a little bit about the Crime and Justice Institute at CRJ. CRJ provides nonpartisan policy analysis, consulting, and research services to improve public safety throughout the country. Our goal is to make criminal and juvenile justice systems more efficient and cost-effective to promote accountability for achieving better outcomes. Our strength lies in our ability to bridge the gap between research, policy, and practice in public institutions and communities and provide evidence-based, driven recommendations. Let me now introduce our presenters. Bill Word is a faculty member at the University of Colorado at Boulder Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence. Prior to this, he was a senior project manager at the Center for Effective Public Policy. The center managed the National Resource Center for Collaboration in the criminal justice system and resource sites, Center for Sex Offender Management in Washington, D.C. Mr. Woodward also has extensive consulting experience. His consulting clients include Center for Effective Public Policy in Silver Springs, Maryland, National Institute of Corrections, U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., the Hawaii Interagency Council on Intermediate Sanctions, U.S. Federal Probation and Parole in Hawaii, Central Ohio, South Dakota, and Arizona districts, and San Diego Probation. Woodward worked extensively with the Colorado criminal justice system, serving from 1984 to 89 as director of the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice for both Governors Lamb and Romer, where he was responsible for offender management, strategic planning, and evaluation in the criminal justice system. He has 12 years' experience in law enforcement in positions ranging from officer police captain. He has military police experience with the 100th Tactical Fighter Squadron in 1968 and 69 in Gwangju, Korea. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in public administration with a specialization in organizational development and criminal justice from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Our center is Dawn Palermo. Since 2004, Ms. Palermo has been the judicial administrator for the Jefferson Parish Juvenile Court. As judicial administrator, she oversees all court programs, employees, and finances, negotiates and monitors all contracts and drafts all funding proposals. Prior to appointment as the judicial administrator, she served as a deputy judicial administrator for juvenile court, the drug court administrator for the adult drug court at the 24th Judicial District Court, a manlist with the Jefferson Parish Human Services Authority, and a slave liaison for Jefferson Parish. Palermo directed the Jefferson Parish Drug Court Planning Committee, started both the Jefferson Parish Adult and Juvenile Drug Courts. She's instrumental in securing implementation and continuation funds for those courts. She received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business and Public Administration from Louisiana State University and a Master's of Public Administration from the University of New Orleans. She is certified as a professional in human resources and is on faculty with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. She's also on Executive Committee for the Louisiana Court Administrators Association. Our presenter is Patrick Bond, who is the Director of Transitional Planning Services for the North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. He has served a number of capacities within the department since 1995. Prior to his employment with the department, he was employed as a correctional officer at the Grand Forks County Correctional Center. Pat is a licensed peace officer in North Dakota, a certified correctional officer, and a certified peace officer and standards training instructor. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in social work and a Master's degree in public administration from the University of North Dakota. So we turn it over to Bill Woodward to begin.
How are you this morning? I hope everyone's fine. I know this takes valuable time from you, other work, and I know what my in-basket looks like, so I appreciate being here. What I wanted to talk about today is a little bit of the work that I've done and that Pat and Dawn have really been involved in around improved collaboration. Dawn, would you speak just for a minute about the team that you're working with for courts, team that we did the collaboration training with? Can you kind of talk about that membership?
Sure. The collaborative teams that we've worked with for drug court and mental health courts and various special courts are comprised of a public defender, a district attorney, probation officers. It could be numerous depending on how many probation officers are going to be involved in the program. Then you also have the school system, so a school representative, and you'll have various representatives from treatment. Usually a decision maker from treatment will be there. Court administration, and there can be some ancillary things too. If it's a special case, it may be one of the care facility employees, or it could be a Department of Families employee. He'll have a say in the case, basically, can invite it to the table and we'll collaborate with.
Okay.
For our transit, we did this in the context of our Transition from Prison to Community initiative, and we felt it critical to have a good cross-section of our department and really support from the top down. We had our director, wards, our parole and patient chief, treatment people, level managers, medical department was key, education and industries staff, we line officers, parole officers, and our institutional case managers, as well as somebody from our training department to kind of be a part of this initial collaboration and certainly their role in what would be future training and development in this area.
Great. And I think for both of these groups, I really want these folks to be involved because I think there's some football game coming up this weekend somewhere, and they're going to be able to provide the color commentary, the what's in collaboration and what happened in their collaborating teams. So we wanted them to be a part of this conversation, and we wanted it to be a conversation among us as much as possible. And so I want to start first with sort of my review of disasters in collaboration. And certainly I think you remember the Challenger accident where we lost a lot of astronauts. a disaster in collaboration because there was a member of that collaborating team who listened to, basically. And he came, I think it's too cold to send this rocket out here because those O-rings can't handle it. He was right, and so collaboration kind of failed there. I think this one I remember was Waco. At Waco, we lost a lot of ATF agents, a lot of people hurt. That a major disaster, and again, there was failure to have full collaboration. There was a team member who knew, in fact, that the Davidians had been actually warned that they were coming, and had lost the element of surprise. But no one wanted to listen to that person, and so there was a failure. There was a huge failure of collaboration there, and we lost quite a few ATF agents in that one, as well as a lot of children and children. Columbia, another accident that happened more recently, that was another failure in my mind of collaboration, and that was a little bit different, but because one member of the collaborating team went over the head of the boss and actually asked NASA, actually asked the NSA photographs of the wing of the Columbia to see if there was damage to that wing. And when he did that, the person who was the head of the collaborating team got upset that he'd asked them to do that. So actually told them that would never happen again, and that the Columbia could go ahead and land. Know that the wing had major damage in it, and by failure to collaborate there, we lost another of astronauts. I'm sure you guys who are listening in have many examples of collaborating teams that really failed, and I think this is such an important topic. And really, I've devoted most of my life since I left working for a couple of governors. I've devoted my life to trying to figure out better ways of improving collaboration in the criminal justice system. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. As you have questions, again, be sure to write them down and answer them. So I'm just going to run through this material, and Pat, if you and Dawn would jump in when you feel like it, I think it would be really helpful. This first slide you have up, I think, is pretty interesting because it really says that if we're going to really reduce reoffending in our community, if we're going to really, and my key word on this is no more victims. That's the bottom line. That's my vision for this kind of work. No more victims. There's three things. That is the top circle, the evidence-based principles. We use organizational development, that left circle, that internal, how we get the internal, how the organization operates internally, and use collaboration, the external strategy. This external strategy is especially important for you in California because right now you're dealing with AB 109 and you're setting up these community corrections partnerships. And that community corrections partnership in our mind, really, that is going to be the key to reoffending in California, especially at the local level. And certainly it's going to be, now that these offenders have been moved to the local level, and I understand the policy of that, and I know it's causing a lot of problems in some jurisdictions. I think ultimately it's going to give you guys the opportunity of really making a difference in your community by reducing reoffending and victimization. So I want to move on into the material, and I'm just going to kind of move through at my own pace. And I think the question about where are we going and what are we doing will be answered in this small cartoon. What's a mountain goat doing way up here in a cloud bank? Well, yeah, where are we really going? And I think if there's a mountain goat there, we might be headed for a mountain. So the discussion about how can we collaborate to avoid hitting the mountain is really where we're going today. What does it take to change systems? And really what the community corrections partnerships are about. You're in the process of changing systems. What we really learned from all this research, and I probably now worked with collaborating groups where we have tried to improve that decision-making ability of collaborating groups. It takes courage to make changes. I'm not going to read this stuff to you. I'm just going to try to hit the highlights. Just having a team sort of make it through a meeting is not good enough. There to be this willingness to gain knowledge and to take on sacred cows. And then decisions based on evidence and data, and long-term commitment to system reform. Having skill sets and delivering evidence-based interventions is always critical, and the curtailing the use of ineffective kinds of programs and efforts. I mean, I'm getting inundated these days. I don't know whether you are or not, but I'm getting inundated with calls from mothers wanting to put their children into Scared Straight. Can't please get my kid in there. Because it seems that one of the TV networks, of course, has decided to do Scared Straight again. I think it's called now Beyond Scared Straight. And I know from the data and the research that doubles the reoffending of juveniles. So why exactly are we doing that? How allow those things to continue? Well, I think a group like the CCP may have the opportunity to begin talking about what are effective and ineffective programs, in terms of, especially as they are building their collaborative responses. So I'd like to just take a sheet of paper out right now, and all I want you to do is write down one thing that you think is characteristic of an effective team. One thing. Okay, well, now I give you the answer. I think the most important part about this answer, this wasn't sort of made up. You see at the bottom of the slide, it's adapted from a book called Teamwork. A pretty small book, so this is a pretty easy read. And what it takes to build an effective team is so critical. So, for example, in order to figure out what these 8 elements were, I'm not going to read through them just yet, but in order to kind of figure it out, they looked at they looked at the Challenger investigation team. They looked at presidential cabinets. They looked at the IBM PC team, that team that developed the IBM PC. They the McDonald's McNugget team. Just how did that team collaborate well enough to create the McDonald's McNugget, something I'm sure that you're trying to keep your children from eating at this point. The Boeing 747 team. How did they build that kind of an aircraft? Looked at surgery, cardiac surgery teams. They had the USS Kitty Hawk crew, the teams running USS Kitty Hawk. They looked at mountain climbing teams. They even compared different mountain climbing teams. Which were the mountain climbing teams that made it to the top of Everest, and which were the teams that didn't? What characteristics of the team who made it to the top of Everest, and what were characteristics of the team that didn't make it to the top of Everest? And still, they looked at football teams. That's covered for next week. But what they basically found were these 8 common elements of all of these teams. Only effective leadership is an obvious one. The right people are on the team, and the CP teams, of course, have all the people assigned by statute, but they're all showing up. And if people are not coming to these teams, then how do we get those people to the team? An elevating goal. Well, the one was so critically important that the team develop this elevating goal. I call it a vision. Because it's very clear that people don't get there. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the, if you remember the Alice in Wonderland, and she's wandering through the roads as she comes through the hole, and she comes to the corner, and there's the Mad Hatter standing there. She comes to the fork in the road. So she says, well, which road shall I take to the Mad Hatter? And he says, well, where do you want to end up? And she said, well, not sure. And Mad Hatter, well, either road will do. Problem is not clear about what that road is, that we will not get there. And if the group has not agreed on what that that is, we won't get there. It's about a results-given structure, and we'll talk more about that later. Standards of excellence, in other words, the quality control measures we need to have, are conducive to collaborating. In other words, how can we improve, how can we be sure that everyone wants to get to that point, and external support and recognition. We'll cover these more as we talk. Yes?
This is Pat, real quick.
Yeah, jump in there.
On that champion, one of the things that we learned in North Dakota, and we kind of muddled through for about 3 years until we really identified and empowered the champion for within our group. And then once we got that person in place and supported that person, it really made a difference in the our organization and consistency in continuing to develop our efforts in the TPC initiative. So I just want to emphasize that champion piece. Really,
yeah. That's a good point, because the people you had in there prior to that were not champions for that work. And that did make such a difference. And Dawn, I mean, you really were the champion for making this work in Cherish.
But I was also going back to a clear and elevating goal. We all had one thing in mind of what we wanted. So we took out the turf battles, and
nice.
We were focused on the ultimate outcome, not the restraints of the budget and the restraints of staff and things that a lot of times you say we just can't do and we're not going to look into it.
Oh, that's a really good point. So that's critical point that we keep following. So if you were arrested for not collaborating, would there be evidence to convict you? You can do it mentally. You don't have to say it out loud. But that's kind of our question. And the question leads to, well, then, if you're going to convict me, what are the elements of collaboration? What exactly does collaboration mean? We find a lot of people get confused about what it really means. And is collaboration different from working, cooperation, and coordination? There are other words we tend to use, and we tend to think they're collaboration. But what we know is they really aren't. And I'm going to just go through this real quickly, because networking is really just the exchange of information. We'll alter some of our activities to help somebody else. Coordination is sharing of resources, but collaboration really requires the enhancement of the capacity of another for the benefit of all. In other words, we can only have a common purpose if we actually enhance the capacity of someone else to help get the job done. And look at that in a little more detail. There's that definition. Look at the key words under operation. We can see that that's characterized by some trust and reliability. I'm going across the top of the chart now. Does my arrow show up when I do this or not? I'm not sure it does. If that's not a problem.
I don't think it does, Bill.
Okay, got it. Okay, characterizing the relationship, I'm looking at the top of the chart. Trust is the major characteristic for cooperation, for nation, its integrity and discipline. And collaboration, it's really understanding, full understanding, and a sense of selflessness. That I'm not here to improve my ego. I'm here to make sure we get to the vision. I'm at a hospital in Israel that takes Palestinians and Israelis and anyone who comes to the front door, and they actually may well be enemies of each other, but within that hospital, everyone's treated the same. Everyone gets exactly the same treatment, no matter what their religious presence are, no matter where they come from, they're all treated the same because they have that single vision, and that's to help people get well. And kind of where we're looking at going for CCPs and hoping that we can help CCPs find that clear vision. We'll get to the point where people can be selfless about going after that goal. And I'm sure some of you have worked in collaborating groups and you know how this works. I think the other one here I want to talk about is see the involvement. The third one down. You want to involve everyone who's a stakeholder, and you want to be pretty formal in relationships in those meetings because that really helps coalesce the group. It's formal in the sense that people can't speak when they want to, but formal in the sense that there are rules for running the group, and that the group has very, very clear goals and outcomes, and they're all headed in the same. Everybody's headed in the same direction. And there's distinguishing pieces of this table. Let's differentiate between cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. Collaboration being the most productive of them all. How many times in your career have you experienced true collaboration, and what was different? Write one thing that was different. I see it. That's the problem with these is I can't see what you're writing down. So when we talk about collaboration in public safety, the consequences are too great not to collaborate. I think that example from Waco is the best one of all. And certainly the Attica in the 70s, that was even worse. We lost 28 correctional officers in Attica in 1971. So that's a huge failure to collaborate. And visual outcomes. What's seen from collaborating teams? What is something you've seen a collaborating team do? An accomplishment of one of the collaborating teams you've operated in. Okay. So some of the things that we know in general we get from collaborating teams. We increase knowledge and understanding and better decisions and greater political support. We get sharing instead of competition, and we effective system change. And I know in one line that no one feels like they got enough money to manage all these offenders coming into your communities, and I'm sure you feel that way as well. So that's why collaborating becomes even more important than prior to having all these additional offenders come into your community. And certainly I was working with the sheriffs out there as the county, as the Association of Counties. I felt like they were going to be under-resourced for this work. And so I'm convinced that collaboration is going to be the only piece that will help other outcomes for your individual counties. And these win-win solutions. Under Probation, it's no longer possible for me to win and for you to lose. That we're all going to lose if we don't collaborate and together. And I may well be speaking to the choir, and may well be trying to think about how collaboration could improve your outcomes. And you may already be doing an excellent job in collaborating, but may to tweak it some. So I want to be available to help you think about what's actually going on in your specific team. And we want to ultimately be able to help you think about maybe some next steps that would help you move closer to a full collaboration if you're not quite there yet. The team worked in have done an excellent job. Okay. But if it's such a great idea to collaborate, why isn't it done more frequently? What we tried to do here was generate a bunch of questions before we want to put this webinar on that we could begin thinking about and try to answer some of the questions we've heard in the past. We're not sure what yours would be, but in case some of the questions we've run into are there's not enough time, the workload's too high. In our experience, it does take more time to collaborate, so we're not going to sugarcoat that one. A pay me now or pay me later situation. You can go really fast now, and what happens? All you end up with sort of partial solutions or solutions that are not very good for the for the county as a whole. What we say now is that it's better to go slow at the front end so that you go fast later. Now, making sure that the collaboration is fully in place and everybody's on the same page, and then be able to go fast later to make it happen. But that would require me giving something up. And we've learned over the years that you gain a lot more by giving things up than by running out and trying to get as much as you personally can get. And for your own agency, and being parochially oriented about just getting what you want for your agency, does not pay off very well. And in the places I've worked in California, they're having the best success with this. I've really seen people willing to give up a certain amount of their resources and their assistance for the good of the whole county. When I see that happening, it's really lovely. Did that? I really remember that the psychiatrist you had on that initial team, I remember, gave an awful lot of his time and effort to making it a successful project.
Absolutely. Night, weekends, whatever it took, his insight. He was unique in the sense that he was also a special ed teacher prior to becoming a psychiatrist, so he brought interesting parts to it.
Yeah, and he really was totally committed, way beyond what I normally do. And Pat, the team you currently have in place with the community, you've got all kinds of people there. Can you talk a little bit about that team, your key-based team, your external team?
Yeah, sure, Billy, and we did have to give up some things, and it was scary for us because I think at the Department of Corrections, and in particular for institutions, we like to maintain control. We are anonymous, and we don't want a lot of infiltration. So it was a little scary for us, but we started working with opening up ideas and resources to our workforce development, our treatment providers, our DOT even coming in to do driver's licenses, and it really has paid off. We've given up some things in terms of time, in terms of resources, and in terms even sometimes the way we think it should happen. I think in the long run we've been much better off for it.
Yeah, my experience there too, and I even remember that one guy on your team that was from the Job Corps, I think, but also a veteran and running a veterans program or something.
Yeah, yep, and we're able to bring in the Veterans Association and or Veterans Administration, and they're coming into our facility, and so there's just been a lot of dividends paid off by opening ourselves up a little bit and communicating and bringing people in rather than holding people out.
Yeah. And so I certainly saw it there, and I'm sure you in California have seen it in your own experience. When everybody gets focused on that single vision, that really helps. Sometimes players aren't trusted, and the tougher one, I work with we've done some work with sheriffs around, and for some reason I'm shocked, but for some reason they found that they don't trust some of their county commissioners, and that doesn't happen in California. I'm sure the county boards are trusted by everyone, but if that trust isn't there, then what we usually find is it's very important to actually build a strategy for each member of this key board, and that's included there. But any member of that board that is not trusted, then there has to be a separate strategy to put them on board and build that trust. And some of the things we've talked about using is to be clear that we understood the goals and objectives of each of the people the trust problems with, and their individual temperament. That is, say what are real strengths and weaknesses in terms of how to approach problems. And the third is who are the people who are closest to them? Who are the people they do trust? And we do to get closer to those folks. And so some of the strategies we've used, and there even is work I've done with collaborating groups, I even sometimes will do an actual mapping of all stakeholders. And that mapping, try to figure out exactly how to manage a particular stakeholder to improve their trust and to improve our trust and our working ability with them. Because in the case of the CCPs, each one of those stakeholders is going to be critical for the success of the CCP in managing offenders in the community. And so it's worth the time it takes to figure out precisely what that problem is. Sometimes, and problems here in Colorado certainly, and you may there, we're just one day away, and they want to be impartial. I think at the CCPs, if I remember correctly, though, they're required to be on that board, so you wouldn't have that kind of a problem with your judges. I'm hoping you wouldn't have that problem with your judges. And very often, they do feel like there's a conflict of interest. They can just remove themselves from a particular discussion, but usually they'll stay on boards as long as no individual person's name comes up. If there's an individual we're going to be discussing, then they have to remove themselves. But when they're working on policy, I think in our case, you shouldn't have that kind of a problem with judges. I've seen it in other jurisdictions, but I'm guessing you won't have problems there. If you do, then question online, and I'll come back to that because it's about managing that. And sometimes people had previous bad experiences on groups. I'm sure you've been on groups that were really terrible and really hated, so you hate going to meetings, period. Yeah, I have those groups myself, so I avoid them at all costs. But when you do true collaboration with a group, most groups find that experience to be powerful for helping them come to the meetings. Because with true collaboration, you do not allow a meeting to occur without a product. And if the product at every meeting is what gets people to come back to the meetings on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, if there's no product at the end of the meeting, that's when people flake out and don't come back. That the previous bad experience can be worked through, no doubt. People say, well, if we don't need to find something, I'll just approach that person. Need to, and we'll just take care of that problem. So I don't need to come to these meetings. I don't need to be there. Well, I find that things are rarely the way they appear, and that they do need to be at the meetings just to increase ownership. So for the purpose of reducing later blaming, because if they're actually at the meeting and they can contribute and they actually are a part of that discussion, then they're much less likely to run into you're much likely to have them blaming somebody in the CCP group for what happened. And I thought I remembered something about this one with you and your group. Didn't we have problems getting some people to the table?
We had some problems. They thought it was going to be an imposition in schedule, and so every time we met, we made sure we had an agenda, we stuck to it, and we kept within the time constraints that we said we were going to. And we planned the meeting ahead of time for the next one, so you knew far in advance when it was going to be.
Nice.
And occasionally, we tried to do something fun to the team get to know each other, because if you know somebody, understand why they think a certain way, you respect them a little bit more. You're willing to accept the differences in opinions.
That's a good point. We didn't do a big going out gambling event, though, did we?
No.
We thought about that. I think thought about
We'd love
that.
to do that. Yeah. They want to go on a cruise now, exactly.
They want to go on a cruise. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens with some teams. They'll end up wanting to go on a cruise. What are you, Pat?
there was some problems with lack of commitment at the beginning, and then like in here, the orientation of the meetings is critical. One of the things we really found useful is Missouri had a meeting tool that really does a nice job of laying out an agenda, what's on the agenda, the goal of the meeting, setting goals of the meeting rather than knowing sure what you want for outcomes, and recording in there any next action steps. Really made everybody committed to meeting timelines, executing certain tasks so that we could keep moving forward. So that's something that I found useful, and we continue to use this to this day.
Yeah, holds people accountable. Not only that, people see what's coming up, so then they know they need to be there for that next meeting. Something's coming up that they think is really important. That's a really good example. See, I think another one here. I think that was the end of it. If you have some other things that have kept people showing up at meetings, throw them into the Q&A line, and we'll go back to that and work on that. So the essential elements of collaboration, I think one is the sailing example. And I like this quote: "There's a rule in sailing, and you guys are, California, you must be doing some sailing, that where the more maneuverable ship must give way to the less maneuverable craft." And it's probably a good rule to follow in human relations as well. And that is that when you got, and I speak for myself, but in the groups I've worked in, sometimes the prosecuting attorneys, are in a place where they're much less maneuverable than anyone else in the room, and for various reasons. And so in groups I worked with, they found ways to help them be able to deal with some of the situations they were going to run into. Do either of you have any examples, Dawn or Pat, of this one as well? Services, you have some maneuverability problems there with social services at this point.
Well, we still do.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Talk about that just a little so people know what we're talking about.
Well, dealing with our human services, it's a large agency as it is in many states, and getting that group to come on board is still a struggle for us today. It is large ship, and I don't really know if I've got a good answer for that one yet, because we just continue to struggle with that, and that ship is well entrenched in its course.
Yeah.
I think we've tried to keep building relationships, and we tried to keep chipping away at it a little bit, and so we're hopeful that it'll continue to get better. And it has gotten better, but maybe not at the pace that we've really wanted it to.
Yeah, I know you try to stay on top of that, but there's nothing about doing collaboration. It's just sort of the starting point. Dawn, do you have something in this one?
Ours would be with the school system, and
okay.
this has been we're trying to work together to keep the kids in school, and it's much easier for the school system to just kick them out. So the collaboration, we've been able to say, listen, there are other people here at this table that can help you in the school system, and you don't have to do all the discipline yourself, and the only option that you've given is expulsion. Maybe there are other things we can do. Pick up the phone, call, be here, state what you're seeing. And we've also tried to celebrate some successes, which has helped, because it personalizes it, and people see the work is paying off, and they're willing to go a little bit beyond. It keeps the school system at the table for us, because we'll do what we can to make you look good sometimes.
Too, this is Pat again, just to comment that, I think that commitment that Don's talking about still at the table, and that's what in North Dakota, at least, still our Human Service Center, Human Services, still at the table with them. Nobody's given up or thrown in the towel or, anything like that. There has been some progress made. So I think keeping that communication open and people still understanding what our mission and goal is has helped keep us moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think we always have those. We have similar situations. I know we have one in exchanging information in schools in Colorado, where the mental health folks to be at the table because they can't say anything about individuals that they're working with. But a way to keep them at the table and at least agree to outcomes. In other words, here's a treatment program that person could go into. We're not going to tell you what their problem is, but here's a treatment program we would agree they would work well in. So we've had to make some adjustments in how they, quote, collaborate. But on the other hand, those adjustments, we've kind of done overing than they could do with the around the HIPAA rules. So if HIPAA is keeping them from doing and providing information, then we help them find a way to let us know what worked with that person. That's kind of another example. Okay, so that's so one of the things we do when we get into, and this is something folks are interested in, that this is something that may be useful. We have a 1.5-day program that I'm sure you can find these out there, but this is one we do where we try to first assess the current strengths and challenges of the team. So doing this work with CCPs, we do that assessment of the strengths and challenges of the team, establish some of the ground rules, and then help try to figure out what the vision is and what the BHAGs are. And that BHAG term comes out of the Built to Last book by Collins. And BHAG means big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's that we can begin thinking about our future and begin thinking about where we want to be 10 years from now. What do we want this place to look like 10 years from now? What do we want collaboration to look like in our county 10 years from now? The visioning process is going to be critical for CCP boards. And this process takes about a day. And I'm sure you have people available who do these kinds of things as well. So, but I just kind of wanted to through a checklist of things that would need to be in a collaboration training if you actually spend a day with your board trying to build a collaboration. This piece is clarifying roles and responsibilities of each member. And that may seem obvious that everybody knows what those are, but I'll tell you, in the 10 of group worked in, there's always some confusion about who's supposed to be doing what. And getting that really clarified is very helpful. Then Pat or Dawn on these, as they've worked for you or not worked for you, whatever. Success criteria is, in other words, how do we know that we're successful as a CCP is the question we're asking here. Well, those things really need to be listed for each county. What exactly needs to happen in this county before we know that CCP has been successful? And if we're not willing to write down, then we're never going to get there. And those criteria become critical then. And the rest of that in a day, also try to develop those milestones. What are going to have happen within the next 5 years, perhaps? What are the places that we can't get to? What are our minimum critical deliverables? How often are we going to report? What exactly are we going to report when we do report? When reports due? And how are we going to evaluate and be able for the efforts of the CCP? Dawn or Matt, do you have any comments about those?
I think you have to take a step back and maybe put it on an agenda sometimes to go back to those reports and the deliverables and things like that, and just do a checkup.
Okay.
How are you doing? And somebody to be the cheerleader that you're not going to achieve everything you wanted right off the bat, but at least it keeps you going, keeps everybody at the table and energized.
My only comment would be is that that commitment to the data-driven has been critical for us.
Okay.
We weren't always that way. If we had data before us, sometimes if it wasn't in line with what we thought it should be, it was dismissed, and so we had to reshape the way we thought about and utilized data and our commitment to it in this department.
Yeah, that changed over the years that I was working with you guys. It just started moving more and more. Well, what does the data say? I mean, we're saying we're going to do this for, and why? And where's data that says we should be doing this? That is a big change and a big movement for you. Good. Thanks for reminding me of that. That's great. Okay, so those are the 10 things that should happen in a full-day collaboration training. And if you just did a half-day collaboration training, then you should at least assess the current level of collaboration in the group, assess ground rules if they haven't been established, and then build that vision and carry audacious goals and build that vision in half a day. I think that can be done. But kind of the minimal approach if you want to do a minimal amount of work with your CCP. And these are just two examples of ways to improve collaboration. And the nice thing about assessing the collaboration level is that you do that every 3 to 6 months with the group. So it can be on top of any problems that start happening in the CCP. You will have a situation where things may start falling apart, and you don't want to see that publicly. You don't want somebody calling a press conference at the next meeting of the CCP to announce that something's falling apart. You want to know ahead of time. The only way to do that is by doing that regular assessment of the current level of collaboration. And in that assessment, you'll immediately see where the problems are that need to be addressed before you can move forward. Any comments for Pat?
Nothing I end on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you covered it.
Okay. So a way of looking at those essential elements are you have left axis if you really want to get the job done, and on the axis at the bottom, you got to keep the people involved. I mean, it's an oversimplification, but those pieces, getting the job done and keeping the people involved in that process, are really critical, and you're just never going to see outcome without those critical elements. And that's just a visual way to look at it. I have one other visual way to look at that, and that's the for CCP's Communications Partnership. And here I've listed the actual members of the Community Correction Partnership. And what we will look at here is that each one of those members of the partnership are in their own circle. The sheriff, I didn't have enough room to give everybody a circle, but anyway, the sheriff and the police chief, the prosecutor, public defender have their own circle. I had to add something. Mental health, substance abuse, probe chair, the county CAO, employment, education. And so all these are members of the partnership, and one has their own what a center of excellence. And so everybody has their own requirements, and they have everything, they know what they have to do in their own center of excellence. And this show visually says that you can integrate all centers of excellence, and that arrow going across the top aims right at the word vision and outcomes. And it's how you integrate all those different centers of excellence into a single vision and outcome. And taking the time to build that, how you get movement toward that vision. And you use the simple one that a lot of groups use, no more victims, something like that, then even if you use something as simple as that, everyone can get on board with no more victims. And the kind of thing we're looking for here. How do we get everybody on board moving forward in building these partnerships? We know they were forced on us, and the governor did it, and it was done without thinking, all kinds of things. But boy, this is such an opportunity for California, I see, to pull together these partnerships, get focused on a single vision, and then be able to move together with anyone else in the county system meeting that vision. Great opportunity. Thanks, Pat. Dawn?
And about some of this, it's not just the team. We put into committees too, so that everybody can work on little things, and everybody has value and a purpose and something, so that they're invested because they have a piece of it. And that's really helped, especially with our Children and Youth Planning Board, which is much larger.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have individual teams focused on specific BHAGs or big, hairy, audacious goals, and maybe each one of those committees has its own big, hairy, audacious goal.
Right. Somebody's tackling information theory, somebody's tackling prevention mechanisms, somebody's handling financing.
Okay. Good examples, Pat.
You guys hit it. Coming up here, though, I think I have a few things to comment on.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so that's and I seen them break up into California teams, or one California team I worked with. They broke up into a team that would just look at assessment, a team that would just look at programs that were operating in the community, team that would just look at punishment and how long people should be in or not in the system. A team that just looked at the research that was out there. So I think there are, and each one of these levels of these of excellence. So like, for example, the probation chair might take on a team, or the superior court judge might take on a specific team, or the prosecutor might take on a team, and you can add other members to those teams who are named in the AB 109 legislation. You can really bring in other people from the outside. I just want that subcommittee, though, to be chaired by somebody who is a member of the CCP. We want teams working on stuff who are not represented directly on the CCP. But each member of the CCP can have its own subcommittee to work on a specific problem that would get you to your vision. This chart's pretty important. Okay. Enough to think. And sometimes in that process, sacred cows need to be slain. Some of the sacred cows out there are amazing. I mean, I think I mentioned Scared Straight has been a sacred cow for a while in some jurisdictions, but still find other kinds of programming going on that really don't work. And once that team gets clear about a vision, there are ways to deal with those kind of sacred cows and help have the data move you in the direction of remove programs that are not effective. If you don't, and if you need programs that are effective, so for example, in sex offender treatment, we know that really only the cognitive behavioral programs that are assessed to be high, really pretty good high scoring on EPI, the Correctional Program Assessment Inventory. As we know that all those programs are assessed, and we know they're working, and the EPI is a good example of, or the CCP, good examples of assessing programs. We know that's working, then a better place for reducing reoffending. And one of the rating teams can take on a different part of that, looking at programs, how are they assessed? Another one may look at the assessments you're currently using in your community. So, for example, if you're using an assessment to give you risk levels of offenders in your community, and then maybe that's the probation director, or that's even in some jails, assessing the people coming into the jail for their level of risk. The team can be reporting back about the quality of those assessments that are occurring, and the team as a whole can make decisions about whether that assessment is a good assessment for the county or not a good assessment for the county. In some jurisdictions where the assessment of drug and alcohol needs were accurate, and this one's in some counties. And if you know that as a CCP team that your drug and alcohol assessments are accurate, the team can move to make better. So in this in one county I was in, basically were assessing people based on the programs they had. So we had 3 programs in the community, and in most drug and alcohol assessments that use the ASAM criteria, there are, I think it's 6 or 7 levels that can be assessed for treatment, and there are 5 levels in detox centers that you can be assessed for treatment. And so in this case, instead of using 7 levels of treatment, they're using 3 because all their assessment instruments, they were basically causing the assessment instrument to give more that would put a person in a program that they actually had. Now, problem with that. Well, it's a problem because what if the assessment instrument said you need 90 days of residential treatment, maybe a P90 program, but have a P90 program in your community, you don't test anyone that way, then where do you get the data to prove you need a P90 program? Well, because the assessment tool is not being used correctly. An example of how data can be brought into the CCP process to say, look, we're wasting resources here. And in some communities, people were being assessed at a higher level than they really needed the resource. For example, if they're assessed at a level 0.0, or they are assessed at a level 2.0, but that's because you have a 2.0 program and you don't have a 0.5 or a 1.0 based program, those offenders, they're paying for a lot more treatment that you really need for those offenders. So the patient coming to a CCP, and then the CCP can be helpful in trying to figure out better ways to use those resources. And I see that CCP as then taking on these sacred cows. And sometimes it requires permission to go on that sacred hunt. And some communities I've actually see P90 programs being a sacred cow. And people actually being put in P90 programs, treatment programs, because they had beds for them. So then they put them in the P90 program. Well, that's resources if they only need intensive outpatient. Just an example of that. Just jump in. Pat?
This is Pat. I got here in Dakota. We had one of our many sacred cows was the idea the probation or parole officer being the what I'll call supreme authority in all revocation decision making and relative to even how to manage violations. Of course, as people are, you're going to have all sorts of different philosophies and ideologies of how severe a violation is and how it should be dealt with. So one of the things we had to do is break down a little bit of that history and culture of that PO being the decision maker on how to manage violations. We wanted to move towards a recidivism reduction model. We knew that. We wanted to do a better job of managing resources. So we put together a team both in the department with staff and the judges and state's attorneys and defense bar as being key stakeholders, and developed a revocation decision-making guide using evidence-based elements, and developed an internal team that we have to review violations with the supervisor. We have a parole or a violation specialist, for lack of a better term, assists in developing plans to intervene on violating behavior, and if it reaches the point where even revocation is deemed necessary, making recommendations for sentencing or disposition of the matter with some goal of recidivism reduction in mind.
Oh, wow. Excellent. That's a great example. Dawn, do you have any sacred cows?
Not really. It was more turf battles that we had to deal with than anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so, how did you deal with that? Well, let's talk about it. Go.
You have to find a common goal that would meet everybody's needs and objectives.
Okay.
If nobody had to lose anything, you need to find the win-win, I guess.
Yeah.
It took a while, but usually everybody was looking for the best interests of kids, so you could get there in the simplest and break it down so that everybody gains something from the.
Yeah, what's in it for me? Yeah,
Mhm.
everybody's operating on the what's in it for me principle.
Right. Limited resources, they needed to know that they were going to have the debt or something that was going to help them at budget time or help them when it was outcomes were challenged and things like that.
Yeah, okay. I think people can help each other in a lot of ways they may not realize at the time. So, those examples. Our sacred cows, Pat?
No, we're good. I think that's a good example.
Great, thanks. Okay. So we're getting these kinds of teams going. If yours isn't already going, and keeping it going, is that champion is totally critical. Somebody who really believes in the group and in the process. That's very critical in this kind of a case, especially when you're being forced to do this. There has to be some change in thinking around we're being forced to do this, but how do we turn this into the best possible thing for our county? And most of the counties I've looked at, these boards are at that place. But in some jurisdictions, it's still hard. It's still hard position. Meetings, and we talked about that. Creating agenda, and you talked about that, Pat. Careful facilitation of meetings. It's hard for a chair to both manage the content of a meeting and facilitate the meeting, because some chairs have a tendency to run the meeting in the direction of their bosses. We really recommend that there be some independent facilitation so that there's a real chance that everyone has an opportunity to get 2 cents in. You never know when you're going to have somebody at the table who really understands what an O-ring is and really understands that when it freezes, it's going to be a disaster. And someone has to be listening to that person. And there are disasters out there in the criminal justice system that happen all the time, and a lot of them never get to the press. Of course, we saw it in the press too. And meetings meaningful, and that comes back to my point about always have a product. You cannot have a meeting without a product. Comments, guys?
There's more people if you stay on your on task and keep the meeting going. It facilitated and everybody has a buy-in and walk out with the product. Otherwise, they feel like they're wasting their time, and everybody's so overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, then they'll stop coming. They'll definitely do that.
I do that. It's on right on the head. People want to know that their time is well spent and there's product.
Okay, good. Thanks. Pattern of creating impactful meeting records. So making sure that there's something that comes out of it. Paying attention to and managing group dynamics and that facilitation thing. Groups do still go through the same 4 stages of development that you've all heard. Is the forming, storming, norming, and performing stages. And I don't care what happens, you all going through those 4 stages of development. And sometimes groups just get stuck in storming. And if you don't get to performing, nothing ever happens. It's across the group to build ownership and all of accomplishments. Bringing that wall back, maybe it's several flipped together or something like that. I think those successes in front all the time, it's really critical. And also having some early wins, some low-hanging fruit. Is there anything to add, guys? I covered them all. There've got to be some more out there somewhere. But we can sort of learn from making a lot of mistakes. Certainly I made plenty of mistakes in all this. Ready to hear the hard things to the Challenger, Columbia kinds of things, the Waco kind of things, the kinds of things. The truth will set you free, but first it's going to make you angry. So I think we have to understand that anger will happen, needs to be listened to, or a person will be shut down and thrown out of the group, and that may be the very person that we need later to make the most productive possible, the most efficient and effective group that we can ever have. Okay, there's to successful collaboration. I want to pick one and talk about it.
I'd say the lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities, and that goes to the team. You almost, like you were talking about, you almost need to come up with a team scribe. You need to come up with the BN or the cheerleader, and they're going to do something that be the director of probation on the team. I may on the team be the timekeeper, keeping it together. So I think you've got to do clarity in roles and responsibilities of the team, and then also in your individual roles for everybody to understand where you're coming from. You have to go over your roles and responsibilities in your own entity and what can and cannot do and things like that.
That's really a good example. Thank you. That one?
Well, I'd just probably go after that second one, unclear expectations for accountability. You know, I mentioned earlier a little bit about those agendas and ultimately the meeting minutes, clearly defining what needed to be done, who or what group was assigned to do it, and when it needed to be delivered by, and revisiting those things as you go into your next meeting and having people report out on where they're at with on tasks. And we found that it worked really well, and people would deliver when they had clear expectations, clarity on who was responsible, and clarity on when it was due by.
Good. Yeah. I'm sure the rest of you have examples on the power and control issues. I once had a prosecutor decide to have a press conference at our meeting. That totally destroyed the meeting. The unsolicited sharing of information. Sometimes the systems we have of the different people sitting at the table for CCPs anyway, probably every one of those have a different information system. So the successful sharing of information may be more mechanical than anything else, but then it's worth having a separate subcommittee looking how can we better share information if that's necessary, because the information doesn't get shared, the decisions that get made will be worse than when the information is shared.
And about negative attitudes, we've kind of countered that with the data. We brought it to the data because people take 1 or 2 instances and it shadows everything. They think everything's falling apart and none of this is working and we're not achieving our goals. And if you go back to your data and you'd show them, you'd say, this is a rough road, but overall we're doing great. We're still on target. This is just a bad week, or, this is just one example, but it's only been 10% of your whole population. So we would get back to the data, and our team decided we wanted a cheerleader. So we have somebody who is always going to bring it back to the positive to keep us going.
Wow, interesting idea. Okay. Yeah. And I think the point of that too is around managing the media around these collaborating groups. And what we usually find for managing the media with the CCPs is that if disaster, it's too late with the media. But up until disaster happens, CCPs, I believe, and I've certainly seen it in other jurisdictions, have a subcommittee just working on the media side of this, so that they're constantly giving to the media positive things that are happening with the CCP. Here's this positive thing the CCP has done. Here's the next positive thing CCP has done. Those things getting in the media hand ahead of time, and they will then be prepared for the day when something negative happens. Well, this negative thing did happen, But here are these positive things that happened ahead of time. Is the best way to manage the media. It's all got to be done ahead of time. Any comments?
No.
Okay. Next, lessons learned. This is difficult work. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. Yes, it's a lot of work, and it is a work to have a collaborating team. But again, if you want maximum efficiency and effectiveness, the collaborating team is the best way to do that. Not a naturally occurring phenomenon. Person or partner, no one person or partner is in charge. I don't know that any of you have seen that video of geese, but it's flying, and when they take their flock. Is it a flock? I never can remember. Anyway, when the flock of geese, they're flying, you know there's never one goose that's actually leading that. Those geese alternate the leadership of that formation of geese flying. A different goose moves into leadership all the time. And that's also possible with the CCP groups. Even though you have somebody who's designated as the chair in your statute, that doesn't mean that somebody else can't lead a meeting for that team for that time. Developing consensus about change and must have negotiation and are willing to compromise. Comments?
Good part, and somebody's not overwhelmed with the work.
Exactly. Then somebody isn't, totally overwhelmed. We burn more people out on groups because they don't have that. They're not willing to sort of team manage the group. And very often in a CCP, we recommend that you have an executive team of the CCP that meets more regularly, and sort of executive team is the one that set the agenda and move the group forward, help move the group forward. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Pat.
Bill, we spoke about champion before, but in having that champion, it's important for a person to understand that, what the goal is, and that they are not that one person in charge, and that their role is to keep that balance and keep everybody moving towards that mission without, that dictator sort of style.
Oh, no, that's good.
The right person, or people.
No, you're exactly right. Totally agree. Okay. And so, what lessons have you learned about collaboration? These are some of the things we've heard that leads leaders who see the vision, and pivotal leaders not on board, the ship won't sail. And that's critical. And that leaders must attend both the process and outcomes. Getting and using information is harder than it looks. Solid research are not incompatible with public safety. The enforcement are not incompatible with effective interventions. Comments? Okay.
Get back to the data.
Yes, go back to the data. We keep repeating the same thing. Well, sometimes repetition is good. Lessons learned in collaboration, start wherever you can. Thinking about the answer to the question, why do we care? Why care? Focus on trust and relationships. Stand out for you, Pat or Dawn?
We want things to go fast. Patience is really, really key.
And patience is the hardest one to get to have happen, but I totally agree with you.
I think the last one focused on building a trust and relationships.
Yeah.
You need to do an exercise so that you can build those relationships because you learn a little bit about each other. So there might be some sort of tool.
Yeah,
we're
colors.
using emergenetics, so there's different things that you can use.
Yeah, colors, I think, with both of those.
True colors, yeah.
Yeah, the true colors. So that was a nice trust-building tool, building the relationships. Okay. I totally agree, and I think people to see each other in a different point of view helps as well. I think that evaluating then, celebrate, as you mentioned, take risks, invest in structure to operate effectively and efficiently. Also critical, and these are the things that we find are really helpful. Food, fun, access to the meetings, staffing, follow through, release and accountability. And I think I have a summary statement that Henry Ford said. Comes to the beginning, keeping together is progress, but together is success. I'm not seeing any questions that I need to answer right now. And do you guys have any final comments for the good of the order?
Bill, before you do that, we've got 2 questions that have come in.
Okay, okay, good.
Yeah. The first question is, how do you deal with resistance to being data-driven within a partnership? For example, if someone says, well, data doesn't reflect my population, resistance to change is because of the resistance of the data that comes outside the agency. How do you encourage collaboration in those situations?
Yeah, Dawn, do you want to jump in first? I have some thoughts too.
Just mentioned something about this, didn't you?
Yeah, I was thinking of how to frame it. I think going back to being able to, build that trust and relationship with those individuals that may be challenging the data, and sitting down and examining them, sometimes setting some time aside from within that meeting, even discuss some of those things and help understand where they're coming from. I think it's important to listen to what their concerns may be, and then just continue to work on developing that trust. And had some success in that area where we've saw from legislators or judges kind of wanting to dismiss data from their area. And that's been successful for us, is to kind of hold a little session outside regular meetings to talk about what their concerns are and to continue to that communication and trust building.
Yeah. Something.
We tried to gather data from everybody's area and then bring it together and try to digest it. That way there was some buy-in, that they trusted their own at first.
The other place too, that's good. The other place I was thinking is the one way to get results on data is actually to use that assessment at the beginning of meetings. So actually do an assessment of their level of collaboration, and then you that data back to them. That gets their attention that the right kind of data, it can be helpful, because it will usually tell them right away what they need to do to improve the collaboration of the group, and they may learn stuff from that they didn't know before. So number one example. Number two, we used to do some lunches for judges, and we'd go to their chambers and have bag lunch in the chambers about the kind of data we had, and that was sort of like what you were saying, Pat, and that then we had the opportunity to listen to their real concerns about data, where they've been bitten in the past. And most of those kinds of people had some data that really hurt them somewhere along the line. And really, it's almost a detective job to try to figure out their bad experience was with data. And that will really help a lot sometimes bringing them around. Thoughts?
Okay. We have 5 minutes left, so I have one other question.
Yeah, go.
Collaborating in a forced or mandated environment like a CCP different, and what challenges do they present?
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit. It is different because it's forced at the beginning. The real way you get the turnaround from being forced to this is something we want to do by spending the time to build a vision. The group itself builds its own vision, what it was told to do. Then that's where the group is over to owning the problem.
Okay.
This is Pat, and of course, with the same thing. I mean, there was people, when we started our transition from prison to community initiative, it was not something that was embraced by all, and that included wardens and key management staff. And, so it was kind of, we had to work on moving people towards a collaborative effort. And I think history is that, this too shall pass. I think there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
You've been around long enough, this too shall pass. But as a department, making that commitment, that still not pass. We are committed to making these changes, and really, I think that commitment eventually that people that were kind of feeling forced into it to recognize, hey, this can be a good thing, and I'll making it to be part of it.
Good examples. Okay, doing.
Any last comments from any of the panelists before we close out?
Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about this, and if there's anything I can do to folks, let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very good information.
Thank you.
And to the attendees, I just want to let them know that the next webinar in this series is next Friday, February 3rd at 1:30 p.m. California time. It's on workforce planning. And we want to thank you for attending. And before you leave, if you could take just a minute or so to fill out a poll that you see now on your screen on the right. It's just basically an evaluation of the session. We would greatly appreciate that. So very much for attending, and thank you to panelists.
Okay,